Hello, good evening, and welcome to We Need to Talk About Sunday, a weekly podcast where we talk about Sunday service, usually, not always. My name's Joe, and
I'm Jason.
the reason why we have me introducing this week is because Jason was our wonderful preacher this week
I
at
don't know about
Romsey's.
wonderful, but
I thought it was wonderful.
oh, thank you. It's very kind.
So we've switched roles. I should be question master and host for the evening. And Jason, you can answer all of my questions perfectly.
Yes.
So obviously,
We'll
currently
see.
we are in Bible month, looking at Mark, or finishing off looking at Mark, I suppose. No? Yes, we're still looking. Yeah.
No, that was it.
Yes, and this week's title was "Suffer the Little Children," and I just thought, Jace, as you took Sunday's service, why don't you fill us in? Give us a summary. What was Sunday all about?
That no, it's about. So it's about. Well, so we got to the end of Bible month, and I was scheduled. It would have been Micah's christening, or it should have been if lockdown hadn't changed everything, you know. But the extension of rules meant it wasn't that. So I was scheduled to preach at that, which would have been a slightly different sermon and a slightly different service, or a very different service, I'd have hoped. So in looking, I sort of was looking through Bible month, and it bugged me that Bible month said 30 days with the book of Mark, but we'd only done 28. And I was like, hang on a second. So I thought, we'll look at Mark. And then I went to, partly because they're some of my favorite verses in the Bible, but also because I thought they were really relevant to some of the discussions that we've been having as a church around children and what we should be doing for our children, for the children that we do have and the children that we don't have. And it really speaks to me. And so I basically spoke on, I guess, Jesus's two key statements about children from Mark 10:13 to 16. One of which is, and I'll just read it quickly. One of them being that the kingdom of God belongs to such as these, so children, or those like children. And then, truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it. And so those 2 points, what did Jesus mean when he was saying that, and try and sort of extract that back? What does it mean what does it mean that the kingdom of God belongs to those of us that are like children? And then what does it mean to be, for us to be like children in the way that Jesus meant, I guess.
Well, yes. So I mean, straight off the bat, we're picking up on that idea of sort of being childlike, and kind of that idea. I think the things that I picked up from you mentioned sort of this idea of the sense of wonder, lovely kind of image of Micah sort of pressing all of the little daisies as he goes down and had 100 of them, and that none of them was less amazing than the last, sort of thing. And that we've got this sense that as disciples we're continually learning, and I thought it was a really nice point you said, also broadening as well. And I think that's kind of an important idea, because we're not just learning, but we're also sort of wrestling as well, and it's sort of being able to broadening our thinking. And that just doesn't mean just sort of being idle listeners, does it? It means sort of digging deep. So but you did mention kind of potential boundaries that we might have, and I just wondered what kind of potential boundaries we might face in being childlike.
Well, yeah. So I guess with boundaries, because I sort of talked about the Pharisees at that point, wasn't I? And that sort of they'd put boundaries in place, and I guess it's around that idea of broadening horizons, and I guess around the, like, when you're a kid, everything, like, life is a moving target. Nothing is standing still. Nothing is staying the same. Like you are always growing, learning, changing. Like, you don't do the same thing at school as you did yesterday. I mean, that's actually quite unusual, because at work sometimes you do again exactly what you did yesterday. As adults. And I guess it's mainly around not being intransigent, not getting stuck in your ways, and assuming that know how the world works,
Sure.
and being locked down to change, and more importantly, where God might be changing and moving and going. And I think that's kind of that that's the image that the Gospels build of the Pharisees as kind of, oh yeah, everything's all neatly packaged up in a box. They understand exactly how the world works, and that's it. And then Jesus comes along and is like, well, have you thought about it this way? Or not really sure that, and it's very much Jesus is coming and broadening horizons in the same way that, as children, our teachers do for us. And of course, Jesus is called rabbi and that kind of thing. It's a journey of discovery all the time, I guess. And the key thing for us as a church and as individual Christians is to not get stuck, not lock ourselves down, in such a way that, I mean, it's tricky because obviously certain things, theologically speaking, you want to hold on to, and that's the right thing to do. But it's more about the things that don't matter, I guess, and that we shouldn't get too focused on.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's a difference between sort of setting, I think, and crucially setting boundaries for ourselves. It's that obviously the Pharisees got in the way of themselves, didn't they? Really?
Yeah.
And so I suppose there's a difference between this idea of boundaries and traditions, and sort of, and yeah, we're not just doing away with stuff that we that we are supposed to, keep sacred or
exactly.
Okay, so there was a moment where you kind of mentioned about stumbling blocks, and that so you mentioned about stumbling blocks that caused your experience in church to be a less than positive experience at the time, and I just wondered if you're okay with kind of me asking what that looked like, but then crucially, sort of how did you recover from that experience, and how did you keep your own faith alive, having sort of faced those stumbling blocks?
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. So for me personally, I think certainly for me personally, it's been less of an issue than it has for other members of my family. I think I'll put it that way. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll talk to them on this show about that. That would be interesting. But for me, it's more, I guess, less about like stumbling blocks that were put in the way, but more about when the church and I would put the church actually rather than individual people in the church in that case, when the church became a stumbling block, or a church became a stumbling block because of language used or attitude, or just inability to express the nature of God, which is kind of crucial for a church to do. But I guess in a sense, for me it was less of a someone has done something that I struggle to reconcile, which I know is other people's experience, and I think that is a big issue that we need to talk about. That's not actually my experience. My experience is much more of the church just not being relevant to me, and not choosing to be relevant to me. Like, I think that's the key. I've been a part of a number of Methodist churches, sort of attached to in a kind of this is my church kind of thing. I'd say 3, and I'm not at 2 of them because of that. Because as a teenager, the church didn't make an attempt to be anything that I was interested in. So why, as a teenager, if it's quite cold, I guess, to an extent, but if there's nothing in it for me, there's nothing in it for me. I'm not hanging around. My faith isn't strong enough for me to require some kind of anchoring to a church that I don't feel an obligation to go. So I did, and so I stopped, I guess, in both instances. And actually in both, and I would say the overwhelming feeling in both of those times is, well, actually the church doesn't really want me here, it's and that's the feeling I got. And here at Romsey is different, and I think my faith developed sort of alongside coming back to a Methodist church and coming to Romsey, and it grew almost irrespective of what the church was doing. Not completely. There's some people at Romsey who have had a huge impact on the development of my personal faith. But actually, the majority of me moving forwards on my Christian journey has been from me putting in the effort myself.
Sure.
Because I kind of got to a point in my teens, I was like, there's something in this, and I'm going to need to find out what that is. But that required an awful lot of work on my part, and I'm, curious. I'm a big kid, and I'm bloody minded, frankly. And so that was, for me, I can put in the effort. For most of my peers, no,
sure.
They're not going to do that. They're not as ridiculous as I am. So I always kind of feel that I am here by accident in that sense. Not. I know that's not the case. And I know that God has been at work in that and that kind of thing. But in terms of what the church has done intentionally to make me want to be here, not so much. But that's my my take on that. Sorry, it's a bit long-winded.
No, I think that's really eye-opening. I mean, I personally, from my point of view, I sort of had a very sort of quite sort of a completely different type of experience. I grew up in an Anglican church. I did the Sunday school thing. It was fine. I did it because mum and dad went, and that's what we did on a Sunday sort of thing. Then I went to my secondary school, and that was a Catholic school, so I did the whole smells and bells.
Fun.
And I really sort of felt like at that point I was in the choir. I was just sort of a tool to be used, sort of thing. And during that time, I just thought, that they want stuff from me. I'm not getting anything from this sort of thing. And so I really dropped off as I went to university. Fortunately met Heather at university, and we found a church together. But it is interesting, I think, that obviously we were both sort of reawoken, I suppose, from that kind of being introduced to a new church, perhaps. Not because so much, as you say, because the church changed us, but just because of the sort of act of trying to try out a new church provided that effort for you to sort of personally go and, okay, I'm going to make a change, sort of thing. I mean, I started a house group at the same time as it, sort of thing. And I found that actually that Bible study alongside starting the church really helped.
I can totally relate to that, actually, because I think certainly in terms of coming to Romsey, totally that was because of Megan. And that's where she was. And I want to be where she is. So that, that's there you go. God can work through that incredibly, kind of.
But I think that absolutely there's a power in sort of being able to sort of go united as well, and the power. I know that we're not talking about individuals, but actually the fact that individuals can have that effect on people.
But that's what we talk about so often with church growth, isn't it? Of if there's people there that and like and are your friends, and that makes it it's natural then, and then that makes it work. It makes it easy to join and be a part of. But interestingly enough, so for me, and you that experience is for my members of my family. So we had a divorce in the family while at a church. Other things happen as well. In those instances, then it has been very specific things that people have said and done that have made that difficult. And that's kind of, I guess, the other issue. It's not one worth talking about now, but that kind of higher level of hypocrisy, not just the they don't really want me here. That kind of people have said something vindictive or nasty or whatever, and not been very Christian about it, that has caused other issues. But
so that actually kind of links in with my next question then. So as Romsey Methodist Church members, what should we be aware of? What can we be doing to make sure that we as a church don't create those kind of stumbling blocks in Romsey?
be nice. I mean, it's silly, isn't it? Because we've got, like, we know what Jesus said, right? About how we talk to people and how we behave, and turning the other cheek, and being peacemakers, and all of that stuff. And we know that, and we should know it. What we need to do is not forget it, and remember that in our conversations with other people, and remember that. I mean, I talked a lot about family on Sunday, and about how we are family. That's what we are. That's what church is. That's what we do. We are an adoptive family. But sometimes we treat each other like strangers. Sometimes we kind of just don't behave like we're a family. And I think that goes both ways. But then there's give and take, and also we do need to be a bit more, like, part of the point of families, that we can be a bit more honest with each other about those kinds of things. That's totally part of what we need to do, but obviously in a gentle and loving and kind way in everything that we say and do.
And I guess also on the patient with each other as well, because often things can be said that might be construed one way, but actually they are meant in a very genuine, loving way. And things can be mistranslated. And
it's that kind of I remember I put it in the context of, like, it's very easy to say, oh, I've got no there's an experience people might be able to relate to. I have no time for racists. But like, I've had conversations with older members of the family, and you think, oh, and because they're older members of the family, actually you have to have time for them in a way, and that irrespective, and you need to speak into that, and have a conversation with them perhaps. But what you don't do, because you can't, is just shut people off and say, I'm not going to have anything to do with you, because you can't do that. And I think it's the same kind of thing applies of trying to take that. We have a lot of patience for family that are like that. I have a lot of patience for Micah when he's being crazy, noisy. The amount of noise I can tolerate from Micah is huge. So then the trick is remembering, when it's someone else's child, that well, in the church, it's the context of family. If I can put up with that level of noise from Micah, I can put up with it from someone else. We might be putting up with some noise from that any second.
Well, so and you mentioned actually on Sunday that obviously a couple of weeks ago we came together as church members, and we were discussing those kind of big questions as to what is next, and specifically kind of how we're going to engage with these kind of younger generations, these families. And my question is, what do you think is that we can do to engage these younger generations? But or at the very least, how can we, as Romsey Methodist members, support the efforts being made to engage younger audiences, generations?
Ask the people that are currently doing it. Certainly, so I can talk in terms of Who Let the Dads Out. And we need more men. We need more male helpers to help us out. And that, what does that look like? That in reality, it looks like coming and having a chat and a bacon sandwich. You get a free bacon sandwich, but coming and having a chat with someone, and just being able to be a person who someone from outside the church can come and talk to about just stuff. That's a big thing. So that's in the context of Who Let the Dads Out. So if anyone is thinking, I could talk to people and get a free bacon sandwich out of it, and
it's a really small way to help. But
it's not a small way to help. It's a huge help.
Well,
for hopefully not a huge amount of effort. And that's just sort of one way that we can help start reconnecting generations together. Other groups, that's a question, and please do ask it of other group leaders. Megan looking after Monday Sunday, we've got Sam looking after Kids Club. I'm sure if people went to them and said, hey, what can we do to support you practically? Obviously prayer, huge, massive thing that can be done. But if you were to ask any of our children's, young people's group leaders, I'm sure they'd come up with loads of things. I'm sure at the top of the list would always be prayer. But we are, like, it's worth bearing in mind that we don't. I guess we don't do that in a vacuum as a church. I don't want anyone to come away from Sunday's sermon thinking, "Oh, I need to go out on my own and start talking to kids." No, that's not quite what I was getting at.
Yeah.
We've got some really great things already going on in church that are having a great impact. What we want really is just more of that and more people generally engaged with that. And I think crucially, the next step on from that, like we have a huge number of dads that love coming to get the dads out and love having a chat with us. Basically, love spending time with their kids with us, and it's lovely. What we have always struggled with is what's next. How can we bridge the gap between what happens there and what's going on with the rest of our church family who don't have a part in that or can't or whatever. And that's, I think, where we need to be just having more discussion initially, because I don't know what the answer is there. And I don't know what people want to do and what they're good at. But if they ask us, then I'm sure they'll have some really great answers.
I mean, obviously a couple of weeks ago when Megan did her presentation as well, it was also sort of, are we united behind the vision as well? Are we kind of praying about this together and asking these questions of ourselves and each other?
Yes. And a big part of that question is, I know that obviously Megan and the leadership team, we've been looking at, do we need to start thinking about employing someone to help us do that, and so that we can be a bit more strategic. So when you're asking about how he can help, if we can finance that, that would be awesome. If as a church, if we can be able to say, actually, we're going to put some money behind this as well, that is another way to be able to help with that. And that's something that we're not sure about at the minute. It's also something we're not sure about in terms of, we know that we certainly feel called. I think we feel called to work with children in the church. We've got a number of people who feel that is their passion, what God is calling them to be doing. We are working in that space. What we need help with is discerning, what we do next, how we level up that, where other people feel their calling is, and how they can fit in with that as part of this discussion is a good question.
So you mentioned obviously on Sunday that there has been kind of the odd viewpoint that's been put against that, which I'm just trying to sort of devil's advocate kind of point of view. Why not, as a church, just sort of focus on our efforts, on the stuff that we're clearly doing well at? Why not play to our strengths? If we've got good stuff happening in the inverted commas older generations, why don't we kind of play to those strengths? Why is this important?
Because those aren't our strengths. Those are the people that we see the most of a Sunday morning. They're not the people that we see the most all the rest of the time. Through Fun Day Sunday, Who Let the Dads Out, the Mums Group, Tiddlywinks, our church, in terms of the kind of people that we are impacting in other ways that isn't kind of worship and Bible study. Young people, the next or younger generations, far outnumber the rest of us. And that's what I guess that's what I mean about people being called to work in that area. Like, we are in that space as a church. We are doing really good things. I'll make lunch. I forgot about that as well. Like, and that is something that's God has clearly placed on the hearts of a number of us. And I think what frustrated me about that, the way that conversation went, was, well, there are a lot of us of a certain age here on a Sunday morning, and we want this. And the frustration obviously is, how do we gel the two together? How do we take what we're doing of a Sunday morning and what we're doing in that space and actually make that compatible with everything else that we're doing? It's difficult, and there are no easy answers. And part of the plea that I would make of Sunday, that I'd make from Sunday services, that there needs to be a compromise. Who do you think are the right people that should be making the compromise? The people that we're asking to come to us, or the people that are already here? And for me, it feels like it should be us who are already here that should be prepared to, as I said, suffer the little children, and to perhaps go without what we want in order to have what's best and what God wants.
Well, I suppose because obviously the people who turn up on a Sunday are people who know why they are there on a Sunday, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas obviously the people who aren't there on a Sunday don't know why we are there on a Sunday. And I think that's an important point. I mean, I was just going to say that I think it's almost just as important to sort of ask the question the opposite way round. So not why we should do it, but what will happen if we don't invite these people, welcome these people, suffer in order to bring people in. What happens? Yeah, what happens?
Nothing.
I mean,
nothing will happen.
Nothing happens. Or as we spoke with Brian just a few weeks ago, the Methodist Church will cease to exist.
Yeah. It's interesting actually. Some of the there's talk in the circuit about we are separating churches out into fellowship churches and mission centers,
right?
Which is a nice way of kind of separating effective missional churches that are able to go out and do new things and reach people and grow that way, versus churches that are just ticking over, maintaining what they've always done, but only what they've always done for the people that are currently there. I don't want to, no one wants to be in that category, I don't think, but it's an easy one to fall into, and you kind of end up in the church as special interest group, kind of scenario where, well, this is Romsey Methodist Church, this is the way we like to do things, this is the kind of people that we expect to come along, and this is it, and it just doesn't gel with the gospel, I don't think, and what we're called to be, and it always feels a bit like giving up, of, well, we'll take a backup of the church as it is now, and we'll just keep doing that until we can't do it anymore. And the reason why you won't be able to do it anymore is because no one new will have come along, and we won't have got better, and we won't have grown, and we won't have, and God won't be investing in it. If we're not investing our time and energy in His kingdom, He's not going to invest His time and energy in us. That's, He's got a lot to do. So as a church, I'd say not as individual, but I think that's it. You just wind down, and
I mean, crucially, your message on Sunday was the answer to why is this so important? Because Jesus told us. Surely that is the answer. He told us this is the right thing to be doing. This is why this is important.
Yeah, and also, I mean, and Jesus expects children to be in our church, the centrality of children in that, and how He frames it of actually, no, it's right that they're here, they're a part of this. It's this is what I want my church to look like.
Funnily enough, I think it's almost children who ask the most important questions.
Why?
I mean, how? Yes, the why questions. Why do we do this questions? I mean, have you ever tried to answer when a child has said, "Yeah, but why do you do the bread and wine thing?" That they're asking the obvious questions, and that they are, because they're the questions really that we should all know the answers to, like that, and should be able to give. If we can't answer a child's question, how on earth are we going to answer someone of our own age group who says, well, why do you do this? Why do you bother? And
the danger is that you give the Sunday school answer in those situations when, and sort of try and placate children instead of being honest and trying to have a serious conversation about faith, which is another part of that. The why children ask why, the
wondering questions,
but I guess that is who we're called to be as a people. We get together of a Sunday morning and we sing and we celebrate, and then as part of that, someone stands up and explains stuff to us. Like, that's what we do. I often joke my job that I'm a semi-professional mansplainer. because I see the amount of time I spend talking through code with people, and I do sort of think,
Yeah.
but that, yeah, I quite like talking. Have you noticed? But that's, and I appreciate not everyone wants to stand up and sort of do that kind of preaching thing. And I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of doing it myself. But certainly, sort of, we like to pass stuff on, don't we? We like to share information. It's kind of built in. We want to talk to people and explain and help and that kind of thing. And I think there's something. I think there is a natural teacher in all of us. What kind of teacher hugely varies, but I think it's, you know, it's just part of what we do.
I really liked sort of the way that you brought Sunday service to a close. You mentioned obviously it was going to be Micah's christening, but you brought up the words that we would have said, that we would have promised as a church. And you picked out the word maintain out of there. And I think you sort of emphasized the point that maintain isn't just a sort of to keep things going, to keep the status quo sort of thing. It's not just a case of bubbling along and not, you know, not really giving a thought to why that is. And I found that interesting so much that I sort of Googled the synonyms of maintain. And actually there's a lot behind it that's kind of this idea of feed and nourish and nurture and support and uphold. And actually, if you think about it from that point of view, how much more powerful is that word that that we should be feeding each other in the church, that we should nourish each other's faiths together. I just thought that was really nice, especially because early on in your service you had a picture, a family tree with all of the names about it. I just thought it was great that obviously in relation to that image, we breathe life into each other, just like a tree. You know, the branches can't work without everything else that holds the tree together, sort of thing. And I just thought it was kind of this idea of maintaining isn't just plateau. It is, you know, a constant sort of constant. It's alive, isn't it?
Yeah. And I guess in the sense that I was thinking about something Tom Wright said about he did his own translation of the New Testament, and he was sort of talking about, I think someone asked him why bother? You know, we've got translations of the New Testament. Do you need to do that? And he sort of came back with, well, I think it's the job of every generation to translate the Bible for that generation. The job of every Bible scholar to translate the Bible for that generation, so that the Bible continues to speak into the context that it finds itself in. And that's kind of stuck with me for that. We take it for granted, don't we? That in church we use the NIV, but we don't use a King James version because that language, arguably that language never really made sense to anyone, but that's a whole separate discussion to have. But you know, we use an accessible translation of the Bible because we want people to know what it says. Fundamentally, and because we don't talk like it's 1604 or whatever. But that's then true. That has to be true for everything we do. You know, if it's so important that we take the Holy Scripture and we, pull it apart, all the language, and stick it back together again in order to present it to the next generation, it is important that we do that for everything else. What we sing, how we sing, and everything else we do, the symbolism that we use, the imagery that we use in worship, all of that stuff. None of that kind of style, for want of a better word, is sacrosanct. None of that is sacred. So we need to be constantly asking the question, is this the best way of doing this now?
I mean, it wasn't that long ago that the architecture of the building itself had to change in order for that to happen.
And you wouldn't, it's a really good point.
To enable these other things to flourish. So to
enable the church to be relevant in its context now, and
to more than just maintain. Yeah.
Well, it's I guess, but I think that it's maintaining the momentum. Perhaps is a better way of thinking about it, in that sense of the church is a moving.
Yeah,
our faith is a moving target, and
Yes.
we need to keep up with it. And so maintaining is about maintaining pace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm out of things to say, but
we're out of time too. Really, sorry,
it was
I
great.
waffled on a lot there, didn't I?
I really enjoyed it. Thanks for your message on Sunday, Jace. And thanks for everyone for watching. Obviously, this evening. Hope there was something in there for everyone. If you have any thoughts about this, I think there is somewhere that we can have people emailing in questions, and we'll kind of grapple with those. There we go. Send them to Jason.
It's just easy. I've got it in there, so it's the easiest place to go. No one emails me on that address. It's very sad. Just email to say hi. You know,
bombard Jason with the emails.
I mean, but on a slight serious note, it's a very serious topic, and it's one I don't really pull punches on. So hopefully I've worded things in a helpful and helpful way, but it's a conversation that's so important, and it's so, like I said at the end of the service, or partway through the service, this is about who we have and who we don't have, you know, who is missing from God's family. And it's just so important that we bear in mind how little it's got to do with us, and how much it's got to do with our brothers and sisters who don't know God or don't have a healthy relationship with God right now, potentially because of what we are and aren't doing.
Yeah. Do you want to lead us in a prayer to finish then, Jace?
Oh, okay. Yeah,
let's do it.
I can't. Oh, that's weird. I always thank when I pray, I thank the preacher for. Thank God for the preacher. Are you okay to do that?
I'll pray.
Well, no, that sounds weird.
I didn't want to steal yet another job.
In prayer. That's
we'll
really
pray.
weird.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
But I'll let, if you're happy to pray, Jay.
I am very happy to pray.
Thank you. Less me talking as well.
Okay. Father God, thank you that we've come together this evening to talk more about you, and thank you for Jason's message about suffering little children, but meaning so much more than that, sort of drawing in a wider family to our congregation. We just pray that you would continue to be feeding that kind of thought and your love and will into that situation, God. And amen.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for being chief.
That is okay.
Chief.
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 No worries.
Are you off to watch the football next?
I couldn't care about the football.
I can't believe you just admitted that live on YouTube.
I really don't care about the football. I care more about getting my choir back.
Oh yeah. Oh well, yes. Yeah.
Not long now. But yeah. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.
Enjoy the football if you are so watching live.
And if you don't enjoy football, don't enjoy it.
Yeah. Don't. Yeah. I'll be on the other side watching Wimbledon.
Fair enough.
Cheerio then.